She was just another face in the background, an invisible housekeeper in the sprawling mansion, until her son's arrogant fiancé made one fatal mistake. Elena had raised her son alone, scrubbing floors and swallowing her pride. Now he was one of the wealthiest men in the country, and he was about to marry a woman who wouldn't look anyone in the eye unless they were powerful. Feeling a deep suspicion, Elena did the unthinkable. She went undercover as a housekeeper to find out who this woman truly was. And what she discovered inside that house would change everything. And that night, she saw more than she wanted to, and less than she'd hoped for. The estate was flawless. Imported rugs, silver cutlery, floral arrangements in every corner, all meticulously prepared for the arrival of Isabel. Elena, with a scarf covering her hair and wearing simple clothes, discreetly adjusted the napkin rings on the dining table. It felt strange to be here, in the house she had helped her son build, unable to call it her own. She heard the clatter of suitcases on the polished marble. Isabel strode in as if she owned the world. A tight dress, stiletto heels, a cloud of expensive perfume. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed briefly on Elena. "Ah, you must be the new help, right?" she said without a smile, without stopping. Elena lowered her head. "Yes, ma'am. My name is Maria." "Well, Maria, I expect my clothes to be steamed, not ironed, and don't touch my things. You can start right now." Not even a hello. During dinner, Elena quietly poured the wine. Isabel glanced at her as if she were a piece of furniture that was out of place. When Elena spilled a single drop on the tablecloth, the response was sharp. "Careful, would you? This tablecloth is Italian. It probably costs more than you make in a year." Elena felt her blood boil, but she swallowed it down. David, her son, laughed at the joke, oblivious to the venom behind it. She was there to observe. That was all. Later, alone in the kitchen, Elena was washing glasses when she heard footsteps behind her. "Don't even try to make small talk with me, okay?" Isabel said, her voice cold. "I like staff who know their place." Elena kept her gaze fixed on the sink, and for the first time, she knew deep in her gut that this woman was hiding something far worse than arrogance. But what Elena didn't know yet was that she was about to uncover a plan that put her son's entire future at risk. Elena Reyes had never known luxury. She was raised in the Bronx, her childhood defined by the scent of strong coffee brewing and the sounds of neighbors whose lives spilled into one another in shared backyards. She was the daughter of a seamstress and a construction worker who died too soon. From a young age, she learned how to get by on her own. When she got pregnant at 18, many told her that her life was over, but Elena knew that, in reality, it was just beginning. The baby's father, a promising student at a city college, vanished as soon as he heard the news. "You've ruined my future," were the last words he said before turning his back. Elena was kicked out of her home. She left with a single bag of clothes and a baby growing inside her. She found shelter in a small room she rented in the basement of a church. She started by selling homemade cakes outside a school, then found work cleaning houses for families. That's how she raised David, a sweet, curious boy with observant eyes. Elena used to say she didn't have much to give him, only values, and she gave him those in abundance. She never let him go without love or food, even when all they had was rice and butter. She worked in silence, watching her son excel at every stage of school with honors. When David won a scholarship to study tech on the West Coast, Elena cried, clutching her cleaner's uniform. She had done it. He had done it. Years later, David returned with a degree, an idea in his head, and an old computer. He launched a fintech startup that exploded on Wall Street. In just a few years, he was a millionaire, then a billionaire. Elena refused to live in his mansion. She preferred to keep her humble apartment with her cast-iron pans, her plants on the windowsill, and the same neighbors who had watched her struggle. But inside she was still that mother with calloused hands who dreamed her son wouldn't be swallowed by a world she didn't understand. Now facing this fiancé who ignored everyone and barked orders like they were nothing, Elena felt an instinct she knew all too well. the instinct to protect. Something about this woman was wrong. She remembered all the women who had gotten close to David, with their calculated smiles and beautiful words, but none were like Isabel. And that's when Elena decided she would not watch in silence. Not this time. Elena never wanted to interfere in her son's life. Ever since David became a respected name in the business world, she chose to keep her distance from the decisions involving his career, his friendships, his relationships. She trusted him, and more than anything, she knew how hard he had fought to get where he was. But even if she never said it out loud, something troubled her in the quiet of the night. She knew David was good, too good, naive about certain things. He believed in people. He wanted to see the best in them, maybe because for his whole life he had seen the worst. Ever since he was little, David dreamed of having a family. He'd talk about it with a sparkle in his eyes, even when Elena was struggling just to put food on the table. She vividly remembered the time when, at 7 years old, he squeezed her hand and said, "One day I'm going to take care of us, Mom, and I'm going to marry a woman who treats you right too." Now, Eleanor looked at Isabel, and all she saw was an act. An actress dressed in perfection, who smiled at parties but ignored the names of the staff, who spoke with a sweet voice but with no warmth, who praised David in public but changed her tone when she thought no one was listening. Elena had no proof, only her intuition, but over the years she had learned to trust it. It was her intuition that stopped her from falling for scams, that made her run with her son in her arms during a mugging, that made her wake up in the middle of the night because David had a fever, and she just felt it. It was the same intuition that was now screaming, "This woman does not love your son." What did Eleanor want? Simple. For David to be truly loved, for him to find someone who saw him the way she did, not as a walking bank account, but as the boy who would turn red with embarrassment when he gave her a Mother's Day gift made from recycled paper, the young man who saved his first paycheck to buy her a new stove, the man who still called her Mama when he was exhausted. She wanted someone who knew what it cost him to get here, who respected the ground he came from. But was that asking for too much? Sometimes Elena felt alone in this wish. She saw the executives fawning over David, the women laughing too loudly at jokes he didn't even make, the journalists asking about his fortune, never about his story. It was as if no one wanted to know where he came from, as if everything she had done didn't matter. Elena knew David was free. He could love whomever he wanted, and she wasn't there to choose for him. But she also knew something else. When a mother feels her child is in danger, even if that danger wears high heels and expensive lipstick, she doesn't wait for permission. She acts. And as absurd as the idea of posing as a housekeeper in her own son's home seemed, Elena saw no other way. David wouldn't listen to her based on a feeling alone. Isabel was smart, a chameleon. She knew what to say. But who was she when she thought no one was looking? That's what Elena needed to find out. And deep in her heart, even without admitting it, there was another desire, to be heard, to prove to the world, and maybe even to David, that she still mattered, that she wasn't just a woman from his past, that her judgment was still valid, that her voice still had value. She didn't want to control her son. She just wanted to save him before it was too late. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the mansion early, as planned. She carried a small suitcase and a heavy heart. She wore a simple skirt, a time-faded blouse, and a scarf that hid the face that had so often been on newspaper pages next to her son. Now, no one here knew who she was, and that was exactly what she wanted. David, looking a bit awkward, introduced her as Maria, the new temporary help. "She's going to help with the wedding preparations," he said quickly to Isabel, who didn't even look up from her phone. "Great," she muttered, "as long as she stays out of the way." And staying out of the way was precisely what Elena intended to do. She spent the morning silently cleaning the kitchen cabinets. She observed everything: The way Isabel treated the drivers with disdain, how she spoke loudly on the phone, revealing David's private business, how she rolled her eyes whenever a staff member made the slightest mistake. That first night, Elena served dinner with trembling hands, not from fear, but from contained rage. Isabel complained about the food, criticized the table setting, and even made a venomous comment about old employees who should just retire. David didn't seem to notice. He laughed, as if trying to keep the peace. Elena felt a lump in her throat. The next day she was mopping the living room floor when she heard Isabel on the phone, laughing loudly. "No, girl, I don't love him, but I love what comes with him, right? A black card, the helicopter, and now an engagement trip to Paris. Who wouldn't want that?" The laugh echoed like a slap. Elena froze, but she needed more. She needed something David couldn't ignore, and so she started taking notes. Words, expressions, actions, every detail that could reveal the truth. On a stuffy afternoon, Isabel ordered her to press her clothes with more care. "If you wrinkle my dress, Maria, I swear I'll have you replaced. And I don't even know how you got hired in the first place." Elena swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll do it again." Later, Isabel dropped a glass on the floor. She didn't help. She didn't apologize. She just yelled, "Are you just going to stand there? Clean it up." Elena knelt with the cloth, and as she picked up the pieces, she saw her own reflection in the shards. But it was another reflection that hurt more. Her son's, so close and yet so blind. One night, David passed through the kitchen and saw Elena sitting on a stool, massaging her feet. "Is everything all right, Mom?" he asked sincerely. "Everything's fine, sir," she replied with a smile that hid the weariness in her soul. "Just a long day." He hesitated for a moment, as if something in him recognized her gaze, but he quickly said goodnight and went upstairs. That night, Elena cried softly in her small room in the back. Not from physical pain, but from the fear that she wouldn't be able to stop this before the inevitable. She knew what was coming. She'd seen this type of woman before, charming, beautiful, dangerous. But there was something in Isabel that went beyond greed. There was a coldness. But what Elena could never have imagined was that Isabel was carrying a secret, and that secret could destroy her son's future before the wedding even happened. That Saturday night, the mansion was lit up like a castle. David and Isabel were hosting an intimate dinner to announce their engagement to a select group of friends, investors, and business world personalities. Everything had to be perfect. And Elena, of course, would be there, with her wrinkled apron, her hidden face, and her hunched posture. She moved discreetly through the halls, arranging glasses, refilling drinks, observing fake smiles and calculating glances. Everyone praised Isabel for her beauty, her charm, her sophistication. No one asked where she came from, what she thought, who she really was. In the main hall, Isabel was the center of attention. She glowed in a gold dress that shimmered under the crystal chandeliers. Elena entered with a tray of appetizers, avoiding eye contact with any of the guests. "A little faster, Maria," Isabel whispered through her teeth. "You're walking like a clumsy farm animal." Elena just nodded, moving toward a side table. One of the guests, an elegant older man who looked like a banker, struck up a conversation. "This new woman is efficient, Isabel. Discreet. I like her." Isabel smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "She's simple. A little too simple. Looks like she forgot to shower today." The group chuckled. Elena felt her cheeks burn. She didn't react. She kept serving. Moments later, as she brought out dessert, a small mishap occurred. One of the waiters tripped on a loose rug and bumped lightly into Elena, sending a glass of red wine spilling directly onto Isabel's dress. The room went silent. Isabel looked at the red stain on her expensive fabric as if it were blood. "Are you out of your mind?" she screamed, pointing at Elena. "Look what you did to my dress." Elena tried to explain. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was an accident. The waiter—" "I don't care who bumped into you. It's your job to pay attention. This is why I hate incompetent people. People who think they can walk into a place like this and act like they're still in the gutter." The room, now silent, was watching. David took a step forward. "Honey, it was just an accident." "Just an accident?" she retorted. "You want me to get married with a service staff that can't even walk straight? This woman should be fired right now." Eleanor's eyes welled up, but she didn't shed a tear. She just lowered her head. "If you'll allow me, Mr. David," said the waiter who had bumped her. "The fault was mine. I don't care," Isabel interrupted. "She's old, slow, clumsy, and she shouldn't even be here." Someone coughed awkwardly in the back of the room. The silence spread like a fog. Eleanor picked up her tray and walked away, each step feeling as heavy as if she were walking through quicksand. In the hallway, alone, she stopped and leaned her hand against the wall. She took a deep breath. She thought about taking off her apron, walking out the front door and disappearing from this world. But then she remembered a young David hugging her around the waist in their tiny kitchen and saying, "When I grow up, nobody will ever yell at you again, Mom." And there, with her face still burning with shame, she whispered to herself, "You made a promise. Now it's my turn to keep it for you." Hours later, the dinner party ended. The guests left one by one, leaving the hall filled with half-empty glasses and hollow compliments. Isabel was in her room, screaming at someone on the phone, complaining about the dress, the housekeeper, the waiter. David went to the kitchen where Eleanor was washing the last of the dishes in silence. "I'm sorry about Isabel tonight," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "She overreacted. I'll talk to her." Elena didn't look at him. "It's all right, sir. I'm used to it." But David frowned. "You said that before, as if you've been treated this way many times." Elena dried her hands and faced him. "Some people forget that respect isn't a luxury, son. It's a necessity." David seemed to swallow hard. Then he thanked her and left. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat on her bed, her eyes open in the darkness. The humiliation still stung, but more than that, she felt a different kind of pain. The pain of seeing her own son drift away from everything she had taught him. He was right there, in the same house, but he seemed light years away. And it was precisely in that emptiness, in that tense silence, that Elena would make the most important decision of her life. The next morning, the sun streamed through the window of the small room where Elena slept, but she hadn't closed her eyes all night. She had spent the dark hours replaying every word Isabel had said, every glance the guests had given her. The shame burned hotter than any humiliation she had ever faced. Washing the breakfast dishes, her wrinkled hands trembled slightly. In the background, Isabel's voice echoed through the hall. Elena couldn't make out the words, but the tone. It was familiar, impatient, demanding, bossy. A mix of arrogance and insecurity that only someone who has been through a lot can recognize. The afternoon dragged on. Elena, with no strength to go out, stayed in her room, refolding clothes that were already folded. Everything about her seemed still, except her heart. The thought of just telling David everything came and went like the tide. But what if he didn't believe her? What if he thought it was jealousy, that she was trying to interfere? She knew her son. She knew how much he wanted this relationship to work. She was afraid he would mistake her loyalty for possessiveness. And then, in the end, Elena would carry not only the pain of being ignored, but also the guilt of having lost him. "Maybe I'm overreacting," she murmured to herself, staring at the ceiling. Maybe she just had a bad day. Maybe, but the maybe died in the next instant. Around 6 in the evening, Eleanor went to the garage to get a box of supplies that had been left in a support car. The side gate was slightly ajar, and as she passed by it, she heard a sound that made her stop. It was Isabel. She was on the phone, leaning against a pillar, her eyes fixed on the main entrance of the house, absolutely certain that no one was listening. "And I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending," she was saying, her voice low. "He's sweet, but so dumb. He still actually believes I love that little boy's smile of his, at least until the wedding." Eleanor pressed herself against the wall. Her blood ran cold. And yes, Isabel continued. "The old lady is still here. A new hire, apparently. But she's always looking at me like she knows me from another life. I don't think she likes me." Silence. Then a dry little laugh. "Not that I care. Once I have his last name, nobody will care what some little maid thinks. Not even him." Elena put a hand to her mouth, trying to stifle a gasp. She wanted to storm in right then and there, to rip the mask off that woman's face in front of everyone. But she couldn't. Not yet. She needed something more. Isabel hung up the phone and walked in through the back door, without noticing Eleanor. The mother stood there for a few more minutes, trying to process what she had just heard. The protective instinct was already screaming inside her, but what hurt the most was realizing how badly David was being deceived. Later, while preparing dinner, Elena heard Isabel's voice echoing through the house again. This time, she was singing. She was happy. Maybe relieved, maybe satisfied with the performance she had been staging so well. Elena served dinner in silence. David arrived tired, sat at the table, and Isabel came soon after, smiling, clinging to his arm as if she had nothing to hide. Elena watched from a distance, unnoticed. She saw Isabel whisper something in David's ear, saw the way he laughed, distracted, and thought about how all of this could end in the worst possible way. After dinner was over, Eleanor cleared the plates and returned to the kitchen. Alone there among the dirty dishes and the steam from the sink, she understood that there was no more time. David was falling deeper and deeper. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. And she, Eleanor, had two choices: to stay silent and watch her son walk toward a cliff blindfolded, or to do the unthinkable. She dried her hands, went to her room, and took a small notebook from her suitcase. In it, she began to write down everything she remembered from the conversation she had overheard in the garage. The time, exact phrases, expressions. If she didn't have a recording, she would at least have a record. When she finished writing, she leaned back on the bed and stared at the ceiling again. But this time, her eyes were firm. "You underestimated me, Isabel. But I'm more than just a tired cleaning lady." The clock showed almost midnight when she heard footsteps in the hallway again. She went to the slightly open door and peeked out. It was Isabel. She was coming down the stairs slowly, looking from side to side. Curious, Elena followed behind, barefoot, hidden in the shadows. Isabel entered the kitchen, turned on the light, opened her purse, and took out a small, clear vial. Elena froze. Isabel opened the refrigerator, took out a pitcher of juice, and began to stir the liquid calmly. Then, without hesitation, she poured the contents of the vial into the juice and smiled. "Tonight's the night." And then, as if the universe were conspiring against her, Elena's phone slipped from her pocket and fell to the floor. The sound was sharp and loud. Isabel spun around instantly, and in that moment, the two women stood face to face. No more masks, no more disguises. Have you ever had to stay silent, even when you knew the truth? Have you ever swallowed your tears just to protect someone you love? If you have, comment, "I understand, Elena," down below, just so I know you're here, feeling this story with me. Because sometimes a mother's silence carries more love than 1,000 words. Elena stared at Isabel for a second that felt like an eternity. The vial was still on the counter, the pitcher of juice beside it, and the fiancé's expression was a mixture of panic and contempt. "You, what are you doing here?" Isabel whispered, trying to maintain her composure. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She picked up the phone she had dropped and put it in her apron pocket, never breaking eye contact. Her heart was pounding, but her voice came out steady. "I could ask you the same question." Isabel took a step forward, her heel echoing on the cold floor. "You didn't see anything, and even if you did, who are you to say anything?" Eleanor walked slowly to the counter, carefully picked up the pitcher and emptied it into the sink. Every drop going down the drain was like a knot being untied inside her. "You were going to give this to David, weren't you?" she said, without looking back. "Put something in his drink, deceive him, manipulate him." Isabel crossed her arms, trying to control her nervousness. You're delusional. This is just juice. You're implying something very serious. Elena turned slowly, her eyes welling with a mixture of anger and sadness. You have no idea what serious is. Do you know what it's like to wake up at 4 a.m. to clean the toilets of people who won't even look you in the face? Do you know what it's like to raise a son with no father, no money, and no one to lend you a hand? Isabel tried to laugh. What does that have to do with the juice? Everything, Elena answered without blinking, because that son grew up. He fought, and he is where he is today, because he learned how to be a man from someone who never had to lie to get respect. The silence was broken by a door closing in the distance. David was home. Isabel rushed to the fridge, trying to grab another drink. You are not going to make a scene. If you do, I swear I'll tell him you threatened me. He believes me. I'm his fiancée. Elena stepped closer, so close they could feel each other's breath. You're right, she said, her tone unexpectedly calm. He believes you, because he wants to believe. But I won't have to expose you. You'll do that yourself. Because people like you always give themselves away. Isabel stood in silence. Then, without another word, she turned her back and walked out of the kitchen. Eleanor took a deep breath and, shaking, locked herself in the pantry. She sat right there, among the bags of rice and flour, and she wept. It wasn't just anger, it was the weight of years of swallowed pride, the feeling of helplessness mixed with the visceral love she felt for David. She didn't want to be a hero. She just wanted him to see, to not be another victim of a world that mistakes value for appearance. The next morning, Elena sought out an old technician friend from her neighborhood. She handed him her phone. She asked him to extract everything, the recording of the phone call, the audio from the kitchen. If anything happens to me, give this to my son, she said, her voice hoarse. She returned to the mansion with red eyes but a lighter heart. Now she had proof. Now she had strength. Later that afternoon, she went to the garden where David was working on his laptop. Mr. David, she began, still playing the part of the housekeeper. He looked up at her and smiled. Hi, Maria. Is everything okay? She hesitated. I just wanted to tell you something. David closed his laptop, curious. Not everything that glitters is gold, she said, looking directly into his eyes. And sometimes the gold is just gilded plastic. David laughed, not understanding. That's a strange thing to say. Where did you hear that? Elena smiled faintly. From someone who's cleaned a lot of floors and found a lot of fallen masks along the way. He watched her for a moment. Something in her voice touched him. A familiar, ancient sound, buried in childhood memories. But before he could ask more, Isabel appeared on the terrace, wearing a new dress and a rehearsed smile. Honey, are you ready? The dress designer wants to video chat with us. David nodded, but his gaze lingered on Elena for a few more seconds as she simply lowered her head and went back inside. That night, David didn't sleep well. Something was starting to shift inside him, a seed of doubt, a premonition that was growing in the silence. In the days that followed, something changed in David's eyes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Eleanor noticed. He was quieter, more attentive to details. His smile came more slowly, and most importantly, he looked at Isabel differently, like someone starting to see the cracks in a once-perfect painting. The recording Elena had given the technician wasn't ready yet, but patience, she knew, was her greatest ally. One afternoon, David walked into his home office and found Sophia, his personal assistant, reorganizing contract folders. She had been working with him for 2 years, always efficient, always discreet. He had never paid much attention to her beyond her daily tasks, but now something made him notice. Sophia, he said as he sat down, can I ask you a weird question? She looked at him with a slight smile. Of course, sir. Do you think people change when they get power? She paused for a moment, thoughtful. I don't think power changes anyone, sir. I think it just reveals who they've always been. David fell silent. That sentence echoed inside him for hours. That evening, returning from the gym, David passed through the living room and saw Elena, still as Maria, mopping the hallway floor. But instead of continuing on his way, he stopped. "Maria, why do you work here? I mean, you seem different. You don't have the same demeanor as the other staff." She smiled wryly. "Maybe because I'm not from here." David chuckled. "But what brought you here?" Elena stood up, wiping her hands on her apron. "Let's just say I wanted to understand some things, to see them with my own eyes." David frowned. "See what?" She hesitated. "What happens when no one is looking?" He stared at her, confused. "Are you talking about Isabel?" She lowered her eyes. "I'm talking about what's invisible, what people pretend not to see." David became pensive, and then something came to his mind, a memory from his childhood. He was in the schoolyard, being made fun of for his worn-out sneakers, and a woman had suddenly appeared, hugged him in front of everyone, and said, "Those who laugh at you today will applaud you tomorrow." That woman had the exact same tone of voice as Maria. You remind me of someone," he said, almost in a whisper. Elena smiled faintly, neither confirming nor denying. The next day, David went to visit a friend from his old high school. He needed to talk to someone outside his world of sycophants. When he returned, he found Sophia waiting for him at the company gate. She was holding an envelope. "This arrived for you, sir," she said. "From the legal department." "Thank you," he replied, taking the envelope. "Sophia, can I ask you another weird question?" She nodded. "Do you believe that love can be quiet?" She smiled shyly. "I think the strongest love is the one that doesn't shout. It's the one that acts." David nodded, touched. For the first time, he noticed how kind Sophia was, and how in 2 years she had never asked for anything, never forced anything. She had just been there, as if she had chosen to stay. Later that night, he watched Isabel arguing with the wedding planner on the phone. She was impatient, ruthless. "If you don't deliver the exact bouquet I ordered, I'm canceling everything," she yelled. David watched her from the hallway, hidden. For the first time, he didn't feel admiration. He felt distance and shame. As he turned to go upstairs, he ran into Eleanor coming down with a tray of tea. He stopped her with a gesture. "Maria, would you do me a favor?" "Of course, sir." "Can you tell me, what do you see when you look at me? The real truth." She looked at him firmly. "I see a boy who never stopped believing in good, but who is surrounded by people who don't know what that means." David looked down, "And I also see that that boy is starting to wake up." That night, David couldn't sleep. He reread old messages from Isabel, replayed conversations, reevaluated compliments. He found himself looking at Sophia's name on his phone, but he didn't send a message, not yet. The next day, while preparing for a meeting with investors, Elena, disguised as Maria, entered the room with a glass of water. As she turned to leave, she discreetly dropped a flash drive on the table. David looked at the object, then at her. Elena just gave a slight nod and left. He stood there, staring at the flash drive as if it held a secret. Maybe it did. He opened his laptop. He inserted the drive, and he clicked. The first sound that came from the speakers was Isabel's voice, laughing on the phone. "I don't love him, but he's my winning lottery ticket." And in that moment, David understood that everything he believed about the woman he was going to marry was a lie. The recording ended with a chilling line from Isabel. "After the wedding, I'll find a way to get rid of his mother. He won't even miss her." David slowly closed his laptop. The silence in the office was thick. He sat there, motionless, staring at the black screen, his heart racing and his mind a blur. He felt betrayed, but more than that, he felt like a fool. For weeks, he had defended this woman, introduced her to the world, idealized her as if she were the final piece of a puzzle he had spent his whole life trying to assemble. But she was the mistake. A mistake disguised as a prize. He stood up calmly, but inside, something was burning. He went to the suite where Isabel was getting ready for the wedding rehearsal. The makeup artist was finishing her false eyelashes, and a stylist was adjusting the white, stone-embroidered gown. David knocked lightly on the door. "Isabel, can I talk to you alone?" She turned her face with a practiced smile. "Now, today of all days, the rehearsal is in 2 hours. It's important." Isabel dismissed her team with a wave. When they were alone, David closed the door and leaned against it. "Do you know what I found most attractive about you?" he began, his voice firm. "Your confidence, the way you seemed to know what you wanted. But now I realize it was always about control." Isabel frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" David took a step forward and placed the flash drive on her vanity. "This." She looked at the object, then at him. She tried to play it off. "What is that?" "It's your voice, saying I'm an idiot, that you're with me for what I have, that you're going to get rid of my mother after you have a ring on your finger." The air left Isabel's lungs in a forced gasp. "You're exaggerating. That was a joke with a friend. It's just girl talk." "No, Isabel. This is betrayal and cowardice." She tried to touch his arm, but he pulled away. "You spent weeks humiliating the people around me, faking it, and I was blind, thinking I was in love with someone real." "David, please! Do you know who Maria is? The little maid you mistreated, ignored, and humiliated." Isabel froze. "That's my mother." The silence that followed was deafening. "She went undercover to watch you, because she didn't trust you. And now I understand why." Isabel stammered. I didn't know." "This is an invasion of privacy. This is outrageous." "No," David said calmly, but without hesitation. "What's outrageous is you pretending to love me while plotting to drug me. What's outrageous is me believing you were the woman of my dreams. But that ends today." Isabel stared at him as if she expected him to take it all back, as if he were still weak. But David just reached for the ring box on the nightstand. He picked it up and handed it to her. "You can keep this. It's the only thing you'll be taking with you." And he walked out. He descended the stairs with firm steps. He found Elena in the kitchen, her eyes watchful, her face tense. When he saw her, he stopped in front of her. And there, in the middle of the ceramic tile floor, the son looked at the woman who raised him and came to his senses. "Mom," he said, using the word for the first time since she had entered that house as Maria. "Forgive me for not seeing." Elena wanted to smile, but her eyes were too full of tears. "You saw, just in time." David hugged her tightly. She felt in her son's arms not just relief, but the confirmation of what she had always known. He was a good man. He was still that just boy she had taught to say, "Excuse me," and "Thank you." Later that day, David called a small meeting with the household staff. Isabel was still upstairs, desperately trying to call her PR team to contain the impending disaster. In the living room, David stood on the bottom steps of the central staircase and spoke in a clear voice. "I want everyone to know that the wedding has been cancelled, and that from this day forward, anyone who has been disrespected in this house should know they have my utmost respect." Some of the staff smiled silently. Others just lowered their heads, as if thanking him with their bodies. He came down the stairs and walked over to Sophia, who was there for work. "Did you know?" he asked her in a low voice. She shook her head. "No, but I felt something was off." David nodded. "Will you help me with something?" She smiled faintly. "Of course." They went upstairs together. They knocked on the suite door. Isabel opened it, surprised to see Sophia. "What is she doing here?" "She's delivering this," David said, handing her an envelope with legal documents for the separation of assets. Isabel exploded. "You're going to throw all of this away because of the word of some old woman? A maid?" David didn't answer. He just looked at Sophia. "It's not her word. It's her actions." Isabel tried to say something more, but David was already walking away. For the first time, he didn't listen, he didn't hesitate, and he didn't look back. That night, Eleanor went to the guest room where she had been sleeping. She found a small, handwritten letter on the pillow. "Mom, today I understood what true love means. Thank you for protecting me, even when I didn't want to listen. Your son, David." She held the note with trembling hands. She sat on the bed. She looked at the ceiling and she cried. But this time, she cried with relief. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, gossip sites were running headlines like, David Reyes cancels wedding to influencer Isabel Croft after backstage scandal. Fiancée accused of manipulation and humiliation of staff. Billionaire acts after mother's undercover warning. Elena, who had never cared for social media or magazines, was approached by a curious neighbor. "Is that you in the article, Mrs. Reyes? In disguise and everything?" she asked, her eyes wide. Elena just smiled. "Sometimes to see the truth, you have to hide in plain sight." At the mansion, Isabel was losing it. She called publicists, threatened to sue the press, tried to post tearful stories, but her once loyal followers weren't buying the act anymore. "You deceived your own fiancé. How could you talk about his mother that way? If you're an actress, you deserve an Oscar for faking it so well." The comments were a flood of criticism. Influencers started speaking out against her. Even brands that sponsored her events began to suspend their contracts. But the hardest blow was yet to come. The following night, David hosted a private dinner at the mansion. But this time, not with businessmen and flatterers. He invited only close friends, a few longtime employees from his company, 2 childhood friends, and discreetly, Sophia. Elena tried to decline the invitation. "I'm just the mom, son. I've already done my part," David insisted. "No, tonight your place is by my side." When everyone arrived, David made a point of introducing Elena as he never had before. "This is my mother, the woman who taught me everything, the woman who saw me fall, get up, and who saved me." Once again, a reverent silence fell over the room. Many there knew the story of the cleaning lady who had raised the boy alone, but few understood how instrumental she had been in preventing a disaster. Sophia, sitting in the corner, watched Elena with teary eyes. It was as if, on that night, everything was rebalanced, as if the world finally was giving justice to the woman who had fought so hard and was so rarely seen. During dinner, David made another announcement. "Some of you already know, but I want to say it officially. The wedding is cancelled, and from now on, I want to rebuild my life surrounded by genuine people. People who aren't here for status, but for respect." People clapped. Some discreetly, others with enthusiasm. Elena didn't say a word. She just smiled. The next day, Isabel's scandal took a new turn. A journalist leaked the audio. Clips from the recording where she said things like, "After the wedding, I'll get rid of his mother, and he doesn't even notice what I put in his drink," circulated everywhere. Isabel tried to defend herself, recording videos claiming it was a fabrication, but it was no use. Even her former manager came forward to confirm that she had always used relationships as a stepping stone. "Unfortunately, she went too far this time," the woman said. "And her fiancé was a decent man. He was saved by his mother." That phrase spread like a mantra. He was saved by his mother. And Elena began to be mentioned with respect in places she had never imagined. On empowerment podcasts, in society columns, on TV shows. But she refused all interviews. She preferred to continue her simple life, far from the spotlight. "I didn't do it for attention," she told David when he suggested a tribute. "I did it because I'm a mother." Meanwhile, David returned to his company, more mature, more attentive, and with new eyes. He began to re-evaluate his relationships and soon realized who had truly been by his side all along. People like Sophia, who never tried to be in the spotlight, who just helped, smiled, and supported him, even on days when he barely said good morning. One afternoon he called her into his office. "Sophia, I never truly thanked you." She was surprised. "There's nothing to thank me for, sir." "Yes, there is. For your patience, for your loyalty, and for reminding me that true kindness doesn't make a sound." She smiled, touched. "You are one of the most genuine people who has ever come into my life." She looked down. "Thank you." And for the first time, David truly looked at her, not as an assistant, but as someone who had been there for who he was. At the end of that month, Elena decided to leave the mansion and return to her simple home. David tried to convince her to stay, but she explained with a kiss on his forehead, "My place is where it has always been. You already have everything you need inside you, including courage." Before she left, she found Sophia in the garden. The two women hugged. "He's a good man, Sophia, but he needs someone to remind him of that when he forgets." Sophia nodded. "I'll be here," Elena smiled. "I know." And with her heart at peace, she left, leaving behind not just a house, but a legacy. Life has a strange way of teaching us what really matters. It's not always through the paths we expect. For Elena, every fall, every tear, and every silence were bricks that built a strength no one could see, but which was always there. She learned that dignity can't be bought. It's not found in expensive dresses or rehearsed smiles. It's in respecting yourself and others, even when the world insists on doing the opposite. True love isn't the kind that dresses itself in luxury or power, but the kind that reveals itself in simple gestures, in a tight hug after a hard day, in the right word spoken at the right time, in the look that says, "I believe in you." David, who for so long had chased success and approval, discovered that the greatest triumph isn't in the figures in a bank account, but in surrounding yourself with people who love you for who you are, not for what you have. And Elena, who never allowed herself to shine in public, understood that her greatest role was to guard the flame of truth and love in silence, even when life seemed to want to extinguish it. It wasn't easy. It never is. But their story is proof that when love is genuine, it endures, and it wins. It reminds us that sometimes it takes courage to be invisible and at the same time indispensable. To disguise yourself, yes, but without ever losing your essence. Because the real battles are the ones we fight for the hearts of the people we love, even when no one else believes. Elena didn't want to be a hero. She just wanted to be a mother. She wanted to protect. And in the end, it was precisely this silent courage that changed her son's destiny. Love, when it's real, fears no test. It doesn't hide. It appears strong at the moment we need it most. And that story, which seemed to be just about a mother and her son, became a lesson for us all. A lesson about dignity, love, and truth. Months passed since David's decision to call off the wedding and rebuild his life away from masks and false promises. The mansion, once a stage for tension and secrets, now breathed a different air, lighter, more sincere. Isabel vanished from social circles and social media as quickly as she had appeared. The negative backlash destroyed her image, and gradually her name was forgotten by those who truly mattered. The friends who once surrounded her drifted away, and she found herself alone, paying the price for the choices she made. David, for his part, took an important step toward reconciling with his roots. He started visiting the neighborhood where he grew up more often, seeing Eleanor frequently and cherishing the simplicity he had always admired in his mother. The businessman began to value true relationships more, those built on respect and affection, far from the false glitter of fame. Sophia, the quiet assistant, gained more space in David's life. Over time, the bond between them grew, marked by deep respect and a friendship that to many hinted at a new beginning. She, who had always been in the background, became a constant presence in the important moments of his life. Elena, satisfied with the peace she had found, returned to her humble home, where plants grew in the yard and neighbors greeted her with warmth. She still worked, but now without the weight of doubt or anguish. Her heart rested in the knowledge that David was safe, and more importantly, happy. She remained firm in her values, always ready to help anyone in need, but never giving up the quiet pride that defined her. The love she had dedicated to her son, the strength she had maintained even on the darkest nights, now blossomed in peace. And David, despite all the twists and turns of his life, never forgot the most important lesson he learned, that a person's true worth lies in what they carry inside, courage, dignity, love, and not in the fleeting shine the world insists on showing. Thus, the story of Elena and David became an example for many, a reminder that, even in the midst of storms, truth and love can be lighthouses, guiding, illuminating, and ultimately saving. If this story touched your heart, leave a like to show that Elena's courage reached you. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to know who is sharing this emotional journey with me. Subscribe to the channel and don't miss any stories like this one that show the power of love and truth. And before you go, choose one of the stories I've left on the screen now and join me for the next video. The emotion continues there.